Now, shifting gears for the next 30 minutes, Webster Tarpley joins us from Tripoli, that's been under 3+ months of bombardment, to give us what's really happening there. I will open the phones up in the next segment after Tarpley's had a chance to give us a report for any questions you have on Libya specifically. Quick questions for Tarpley because of time, but we want to hear from you. Toll-free number to join us, 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. Webster Tarpley, good to have you pop in with us today.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
Good, man.
Well, we're hanging on here. The BBC is hyping some great gains by the rebels a little bit southwest of here. People here are very skeptical about that. The BBC has a track record of taking these manic statements by the Benghazi Rebel Council and putting that on the air. Rather, there's here I think a great deal of confidence by the Libyan government that the rebellion in the city of Misrata was that it's in its final throes. In other words, that it's going to be over there in something like 7 to 10 days, and that was an important place for the rebels to go into because that is the steel mill. That is one of the biggest steel mills in Africa, and it is, as far as I know, capable of manufacturing the biggest steel tubing in the world, and this has to do with the Gaddafi project, right, infrastructure project called the Great Man-Made River, which is $32 billion, taking the water from under the Sahara Desert and piping that north towards Tripoli, Benghazi, and the other cities. So that, in Yemen, we're told that within a couple of years, there's going to be no water in Yemen. And the guy that I heard talking about this, the expert, anyway, said that that doesn't mean a shortage of water, but actually no water. So the future of human life in Yemen may be very dubious, but in Libya, it is assured, at least in the sense of water. And you've got to put in water as one of the main things that these NATO imperialists and
they've said that's the next thing they're going after globally is the blue gold. For those that don't know, just 50,000 years ago, they know the Sahara was full of lakes and crocodiles and hippopotamus and all of it, and that the water went underground with desertification, and that it's there, and Gaddafi's bringing it up and becoming a spoke for development all over Africa. That can't be allowed.
Right, so that's the vendetta they have going. So one of the key parts of that project, instead of just importing the stuff, they said, let's build our steel mill here in Misrata, right on the coast. You can get the raw materials in, but then we'll manufacture these huge tubes. So not Mannesmann of Germany, usually the gold standard for steel tubing, not somebody in Japan or in the Far East, but Libya, which had been one of the poorest, if not the poorest, certainly in Africa, maybe the world.
Stay there, Webster. Let's break it all down and where this is going and how he's handing out millions of firearms. Stay with us. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back live with Webster Tarpley joining us from Tripoli. We've got some questions from listeners out there, so it's not just old Alex Jones bringing up points. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231. Webster's leaving us at the bottom of the hour, and I'm going to get into a whole bunch of other news I haven't covered yet and also take some of your calls. But Webster, continuing, they want the water, they want the trillions in oil. Obviously, Madsen talked about, and I've seen some of this in the news, that billions of dollars of Libyan government oil money that was invested with Goldman Sachs and others and Sarkozy was stolen, has been swindled. So they have another reason. It's more like a mafia hit taking him out. We have a constitutional crisis. Ron Paul, the congressman, the presidential candidate, agreed with us last hour that this is impeachable offense against Obama. But the ruling class has gone collectively mad dog with hubris, or is it desperation? I want your view on that, where they are just getting more and more crazy, more and more out in the open, more and more naked, brazen, whatever you want to call it. Why is this being done?
Well, that's just on the Obama issue. Remember, he's now long past the deadline on the War Powers Act, so that means he is impeachable. So please add that one to the bill of impeachment, along with a number of other charges. We just passed 100 days of bombing, and people here have compared this to the bombing of in that situation, there was no ground war. So Libya has successfully stood up under 100 days of NATO bombing with the attacks of al-Qaeda terrorists masquerading as pro-democracy rebels here on the ground. So Serbs, of course, notoriously tough, but the conclusion is Libyans even tougher. So if you look at Libya, I think this is the last place in the world anybody would want to invade. And just a couple of other things historically. Libya is the country which was the victim of the first military use of poison gas was by Italian colonialists against Libya in the years after 1911. And in the course of an anti-colonial struggle, the Libyans had approximately 1 million casualties, unbelievable excesses of the Italian imperialists at that time. So what it shows you is that there's no limit to this resistance, and the cohesion of it, of course, coming from the tribes. This included standing up against an electrified fence and minefield that went over just about if not the whole length of the border between Libya and Egypt, but a lot of it. So that's one thing. Now, in terms of the insanity of the ruling class, I have to point out the International Criminal Court, so-called, and this guy Ocampo, this scoundrel, right, this faker, who has organized that thing into a kangaroo court internationally, right? We're still waiting for the indictment of Bush, of Rumsfeld, of Cheney, of Wolfowitz, all the neocons who schemed to bomb Afghanistan and then to invade Iraq. Then no indictments on 9/11 crimes or anything like that. But Ocampo sees it as his job to go after the people who resist this imperialist power, be it General Bashir of Sudan or Milosevic. And the case of Milosevic of Serbia also reminds us that this place it's a murder incorporated in its own right, that you get Milosevic there and then he mysteriously dies of an unexpected heart attack. So
they gave him anteater poison.
Something like this. So they've put out an indictment of Colonel Gaddafi, his son Saif, that is the surviving son Saif, because the other one was killed with the same name, right? Saif al-Arab, Saif al-Islam. The surviving one is also indicted, and a guy called Sanusi, who's the security chief, and this has got all of these accusations. The stuff that this is based on is complete fabrication and complete hearsay. What happened in the middle of February 12th, 13th, 14th, was that you had mobs of these rebels, right, under al-Qaeda leadership, storming military bases and arms depots, especially in the Benghazi area, with the goal of starting off not armed, but to get armed as soon as they could with the various machine guns, bazookas, RPGs, tanks of any kind, artillery. So they might have been disarmed or unarmed at the beginning, but they didn't stay that way for long, and the goal was to have an armed rebellion. So there is absolutely no evidence that the Libyan government was wantonly out there, shooting at civilians who were carrying out a peaceful protest. In fact, quite the contrary, that there were peaceful protests that were going on that were somehow used as the screen to begin some of these things, right? To get people together, because there had been peaceful protests every week or so for some economic grievance or something like this, very limited, and that then became the screen to go after them. So this is one side. The other side is this unbelievable fictitious story about Viagra and rape, which I don't even want to go into, but the thing falls to the ground of its own ridiculousness. I have here a well-informed Middle East source who says that Ocampo should stop talking about rape because he is alleged to have indulged in this himself, and that somehow the International Criminal Court did some dirty things to get him off the hook on some of those charges. So this man is an adventurer and a fraud. That is the new thing that has happened here today. It's a kangaroo court of hypocrites, and I guess we have to be thankful that the U.S. is not in it, right? That's some little mercy in this whole terrible situation. The thing thing about the insanity of the ruling class is of course that, right? When you have a ruling elite that's based on derivatives and other kinds of finances, and when they see these castles of cards that they've built come crashing down before their eyes, they go collectively insane, and they lash out. Let me just give you an example. In September 21st, 1931, you had the bankruptcy of the British pound. The central event of the last depression was the bankruptcy of the pound in September 1931, when the Bank of England ceased gold payment. And then within about a week of that, I think a couple of days before, you have the Japanese setting off this provocation so they can invade Manchuria. So the idea that when you see a really acute economic depression taking shape, this is often immediately accompanied by most insane military adventurism of the type that we see here.
We took a little bacon and we took a little beans and we caught the bloody British in a town in New Orleans. We fired our guns and the British kept...
Yeah, the Drudge Report, drudgereport.com, is linked in the middle corner in red. Cancer surges and TSA body scanner operations. Get that article. Get it out to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. This is important. This is one of the biggest blows against their power grab ever, that they've been covering up the level of radiation and covering up the cancer clusters. And we've got links in the article to the PDFs with the internal TSA people hopping mad about this. This is where they've had them going back to late 2002, so 7.5, 8 years. That's, gosh, 8 years. Time just flies. And this is huge news. So this really shows how evil this government is. And now it's turning out that Pistoli is lying about them not telling her to take the diaper off, playing these word games of, well, we said you can't fly if you don't take the diaper off and let us check it, but we didn't say take the diaper off. You know, all these word games, twisting the meanings, playing games. Just incredible. Meanwhile, they're throwing the book at people. Army vet in jail after marking wrong box on passenger application. Also, the Drudge Report just updated. Washington Post, White House chief for sale. Obama courts big donors. And Obama is doing White House fundraisers in the White House, which is illegal. Webster, I don't mean to get off in other issues, but you got to stay longer now because I promised to go to calls for you. So hopefully you can stay in the next segment. This is a short one.
Sure.
It's like a time warp on this show. But it just, government at every level just doesn't care about the law anymore. And that always, I guess, happens when you go into these degenerate phases.
Well, I mean, certainly one thing you see here is just anarchy, right? You've got, on the one side, you've got a government which is functioning on the whole rather well, given the circumstances. On the other hand, in Benghazi, you've got 35 factions, and they're trying to get, each faction is trying to get NATO to bomb the other faction by sending in false reports to NATO. And then you've got, in the world, right, at the level of the UN, you got total anarchy there, because there is this UN charter. It does say the only way that they can apply military force is supposed to be for threats to international peace and security, and not anything to do with the internal affairs of sovereign states. So they basically trampled that. So the Security Council has violated the charter, and there's the problem with that whole system, that there's no mechanism to strike down what you'd call an unconstitutional decision by the Security Council. So a lot of people here say, get out of the UN, right? Create a parallel institution, or just get out of it.
Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?